chance. I don't have a prepared talk, so I'm just going to talk off the cuff if that's okay. When I first got married, my first rental house was here in Spanish Fork. It was down on the west side. I can't remember who we rented it from, but my wife and I have fond memories of that. And that's pretty good from a guy who grew up in Springville to have his first house here in Spanish Fork. So we love this town. Well, I'm grateful for the chance to be able to come here and talk, and let me just endorse some of the things that Vaughn has talked about, and then maybe give you perspective from overall banking and how that will assist you, not only for small business lending, but also lending in general. And I want to talk a little bit about this topic that you hear oftentimes talked in the media, that banks are not lending. And I think that it's a very important part of this recovery that we so desperately need. Vaughn talked about this program about the SBA, and I think most of the institutions that I'm aware of that service the Spanish Fork area do SBA lending. It is a very important part of a small business package that you ought to always just keep in mind. And the reason why he mentioned some of the advantages is that, let's say, for example, the package comes into an institution and they look at the components of what you've got. And let's say you're a little short on some component of that, which, let's say, a down payment. You don't have down payments, you've stretched your working capital to a point where you just don't have a lot of down payment or have just a little bit of down payment. The SBA is kind of like the person who helps plug the deficiencies that the bank is looking for. Down payment, maybe character, collateral, those kinds of things. It will say, you know, with the help or the endorsement of SBA, we can make this loan work. Where under normal banking conditions, you would say, well, that's too high of a risk, or they don't have enough cash in it, that we're able to do that under conventional terms. Does that make sense? So SBA is able to come in and partner up with you and with the banks and to lower the risk because they're guaranteeing a portion of that, and it makes a very good arrangement. We do lots of SBA lending. In fact, I was telling Vaughn, I probably did one of the first SBA 504 loans in the Valley, and I remember when we did that. This was 100 years ago when I had a full head of hair, and it was a good experience, and it helped that business because they didn't quite have enough cash to build this facility that they were trying to do. I think back then it was actually called 503, and they've changed it to a 504, and the 503 has to do with equipment or something, if I remember right. But it's a great component, and we like the attributes of SBA, and so I encourage you to look at that sort of a thing. The other great advantage that Vaughn talked about is, let's say you even have enough cash. Lots of banks have a difficulty just because of the makeup of their balance sheet to giving 10, 15, and 20-year fixed rate loan rates. And with the component of a 504, you're able to get a fixed rate for 20 years on a building and 10 years on equipment. So it's, even if you have the cash, and the SBA provides some very good fixed rate money that's available out there. The offset to it is you are working with the federal government. And the federal government is not known for making their forms very simple. It's a very complicated form, and sometimes you get frustrated. And we have borrowers who say, just phooey on it. There's just way too much here for me to be a part of. And we understand that. But we work with the SBA. And I will say that we've had, because of the economic downturn, we've had a lot of SBA loans go bad. And they have been very good about standing up to their guaranteeing, working through that process. It is a very lengthy process, but they have been very good. So I just encourage you as a business owner to look at that. The second comment I was going to make had to do with the concept that banks are not lending. Working with lots of banks throughout the state, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, lots of banks were doing what you were doing, standing in front of a mirror going, oh my gosh, what in the heck is going on? And we were as concerned as you were, not knowing where this slippery slide was going to stop. And you see as well as we see that the whole downward slide has slowed significantly, if not stopped. And we see the economic activity going on, and virtually all banks, particularly in this valley, are making loans. We have always been making loans. But lots of banks stopped making loans. But I can tell you that as far as I know, virtually all the banks out there are making loans and are willing to do it. They're very cautious, as you are cautious. Our standards, I'm speaking of central bank, have not really changed very much at all. We try to be consistent through good times and bad, so that you as a borrower have a consistent idea of what is required of you. Lots of institutions you see, read in the paper that they have restricted their standards, made it tougher to do. And so you just have to be aware during economic times like this that many banks will tighten up their standards, and it's important for you just to be aware of those things. So it's a natural thing for the media or for government to say, well, if banks would just loan, we would be in good shape. And I'm here to tell you from a banking standpoint, if people would just come borrow, we'd be happy to make loans. I was back in Washington, D.C. When they were passing the small jobs bill. And we had lots of the administration and the Federal Reserve look at us banks, there were about 60 of us there, and they said, why aren't you lending? And it was with great feeling that we could look at them and say, we are lending. People are not borrowing. You have created such an atmosphere of uncertainty in this country that it is making it very difficult for them to be able to take the risk to borrow. And we would say, let me give you an example. If the businesses don't understand how much it costs them to handle health care, how are they going to make a business decision? How are they going to make regulation? You keep changing regulation on them in their businesses. Banking, as an example. And number three, you keep messing around with these taxes and talking about changing taxes, raising taxes, working on taxes. I said a normal business owner is going to sit back and say, you know, I'm doing okay now. I think I'm just going to wait a year and see what happens with all of this. And I said, you need to know that you are creating so much uncertainty in the market, you're your own worst enemy. Well, it's a little like talking to that wall. They don't quite want to accept that responsibility, but that is truly what has been going on in America, is that there's so much uncertainty in the environment, it makes it very difficult for people to make business decisions. So I'll close by just giving you this little snippet, and I gave this to a group just recently. There is great healing going on. It is a slow process. It's like having a very deep wound. Lots of our economy has really been in intensive care, and it just takes time for that wound to heal. We as Americans are very impatient, and we want things done now. We want it done immediately, and this healing is going on, and we just have to be patient. We see it in the economics of Utah County and in Utah. It's a very good economy to be a part of. I have tremendous faith in this country. I trace my roots, like many of you, back to Plymouth Rock. And this is a wonderful country. This is not a country that's going to blow up. And I have people talk all the time about this wonderful sense of revolution that we need to have in this country, that we need to be more militant. And we just went through a wonderful process in which you and I can create our own little revolution, and we did, by the way we vote. We have the greatest gift of the world in being able to vote people in and out. And we need to recognize the power of that simple thing. Our country is very strong, and we just patiently need to let this heal. I would encourage any business owner not to take unreasonable risks, but you want to be buying when people are selling and selling when people are buying, if you want to make money. But it takes a little bit of nerve and risk-taking in order to do that. So you have to be very careful about how you do it. But don't follow the crowd. If there's one thing I've learned in talking with successful business people, it's that they sell when people are buying and buy when people are selling. But I appreciate it. I appreciate the chance to be here. So